Hello and welcome back to the Wheel Talk Podcast. My name is Abby Mickey and I am here with Matt Neef.
Oh wow. Not only do I get invited back, but I get first billing. How exciting is that?
And Loren Rowdy.
You deserve to be introduced first, Matt, because it's always such an honor to have you on here. We love having you.
That's lovely. Thank you.
We gave Gracie the day off
After 10 days of the Giro or something like that. Heavily pregnant, we might add. So kudos to Gracie for staying up till early hours of the morning. But as we joked last week, it's just prepping her really for what's to come in a few weeks.
Very true. And yeah, I mean, she needed a rest from cycling after the 10 days of Giro coverage and covering the race at ungodly hours of the day because Australia. She's off today, but we've got a great replacement in Matt.
Thank you. Speaking of ungodly hours, Abby, what time is it for you there right now?
4:09 a.m. on Monday, May 13th.
If anyone doubted Abby's commitment to women's cycling, this is just a testament to how much she cares about not only women's cycling, but the podcast and Escape Collective. So,
and the fact that she's sick as well while doing it. So
yeah, that's not Abby's sound quality. It's just
Thanks, guys.
a really husky, different person. It's actually when you first came on the podcast, I was
just
like,
strep throat.
Is it my sound or Shane?
Nope. No, it's me.
All the feels for you. You're not going to have to wake up at 4 a.m. again.
We'll see. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, despite it being a full week since we recorded the last episode and I was sick during that episode, I'm now sick again. So we'll see. It's fine. We have a lot of great stuff to talk about. We have the Navarra Classic that happened last week. It's not a World Tour race, but it was such a good race that we're definitely going to dive into it. Itzulia happened obviously over the weekend, and there's some rumours that have been reported elsewhere, so I feel safe to talk about them on the podcast as well. So I think we should start with Navarra because it's a good entry point into the 3 days of Itzulia, and man, it was just such a good race. It was super aggressive pretty much the whole race, and in the end it was won by Hannah Ludwig, 23 kilometers solo. There was attacks going from Little Trek, from Movistar, a lot of attacks from Liana Lippert, but also a really awesome solo breakaway from Loretta Hansen, who's back in Europe, back in the peloton after a good break post Spring Classics. And Hannah Ludwig soloed to victory because the group behind that had the numbers with Movistar and Trek just could not figure out how to chase her. And I think there's a lot to kind of take away from the race in terms of there was a lot of pressure on Movistar to deliver. It's their home race. But also the win for Hannah Ludwig is amazing because she's a rider who she started with Canyon SRAM, had a pretty rough go of it for a couple years, went over to Uno X, had a rough go of it there, and is now at Cofidis and got her first pro win.
Yeah, I think if you look at the group that she was in, that she made that move from, I think she'd be the first to admit that there were bigger name riders in there, and that this result, not to take anything away from her, but it's maybe a little bit of a surprise. But I think it really just goes to show that you have to take your opportunities, and the way that she attacked off the back of another move and then went on with it when she saw an opportunity presented to her, I thought it was really cool. It was a really good result, I think. I love to see results like that where a rider takes their chance against more favoured opponents and come up trumps. So yeah, kudos to her for sure. It was a great ride, and she's a strong time trialist, and she managed to hold them off by, I think, 8 seconds by the end with some fast sprinters behind. So yeah, a really cool win, and she's a cool character. I got to speak to her at the tour last year and really enjoyed chatting with her. So really happy to see that win.
At the end of near the end of the race, it really looks like, oh man, is she going to do it? Are they going to catch her? Because for a while it was like, oh no, she's got this, and then all of a sudden when Trek actually got on the front and started chasing instead of just attacks going left, right, and center, then the gap really started to plummet really, really fast. But she did hold on to it. And it was interesting watching the dynamic between Little Trek and Movistar, because like Little Trek had 3 in there with Sharon Van Anrooy, Brody Chapman and Isabella Holmgren, who's one of the new riders on the team, the young Canadian twins. And then Movistar had Elena Sierra and Liana Lippert, and they really like had a hard time trying to control each other, and kind of just left Hannah out front, which worked out for Hannah. But I think for Movistar, they really wanted this win. Especially Lippert after the Vuelta, she was really aggressive all day, and she ended up finishing not even in that group that finished with the second place, which was Arlene Sierra. But I mean, I think like for Lippert, it's just kind of chipping away at the form before we get to the Tour and the Giro and the bigger races kind of coming up on the calendar.
Do we think that maybe Little Trek and Movistar thought that, or they didn't take Hannah Ludwig as seriously as maybe they should have? Like, did they not give her the respect that she maybe deserved, or were they just so focused on each other?
That was almost what I was going to say, but I didn't want to put my foot in it there. She was obviously one of those riders that Canyon SRAM saw a lot of potential in when they signed her all those years ago, but maybe didn't really live up to the expectation they predicted. So you do often see that, and then it takes just a rider to move teams, and then an opportunity like this to happen where people go, oh, wow, actually, yeah, we have underestimated this rider. And I think for Movistar, they'd be looking at it as really a missed opportunity, because have they had any wins this season? I don't know.
It's a good question, yeah.
They have had a bit of a rough season. I mean, their classics were a bit off. They didn't have the classic season that I think they wanted. I think they've had one win with maybe Olivia.
They've had 5 wins for the year, but the biggest race of those was the Almeria Classic in Spain, which Olivia Barril won.
That's right.
That might have been in February. So yeah, one of them was the national championships. 3 of them were 0.2 races, and then a 1.1. So yeah, that's a really good point, Loren.
And if you compare that to last year.
Well, I mean, the last couple of years with Annemiek, right? She would sweep up a whole bunch of points and wins during the classic season, and then move on to tour season. It was kind of her domain. So their hopes obviously were very much in Liana Lippert. And I guess when they signed someone like Emma Norsgaard, they were thinking as well that she would become one of those big classics riders that would make her presence known there. And she had a good classics, I think. She was really aggressive and racing in a different style to what we've seen before, which was definitely evident last year with that Tour de France win. But yeah, definitely a team, I think, that probably hasn't gotten quite the results they were looking at. And this was a missed opportunity in my eyes. Because if you look at that group, she was the standout rider. Like, no one was going to be faster than her.
Yeah, I think we'll probably get to it in a little bit, but if you look at Elena Sierra's last few weeks, she's been building really nicely. She had a good race at Itzulia and was second here behind Hannah Ludwig. She's had a bunch of second places actually this year, so I feel like she's probably not too far away from a victory, but yeah, even still, they've had a tough go of it so far, and they'll certainly be hoping that Lippert can find some of that form for the Giro and the Tour.
Yeah, and I mean, I think for Lippert, like, it's just about that. It's just about coming back into form right after her off-season injury and working her way back. But I do think that they haven't done a great job of leaning on the talent that they have on the team already, and I think a lot of that is Arlena Sierra, because she's so strong, and she finished second, like, from a pretty strong group, but she's had some impressive results all season, and I don't know what is holding her back from like a big World Tour win. She's won World Tour races in the past, but I don't know what's holding her back at this moment from kind of having more control of the team and having more leadership within the team. I would imagine that would be a no-brainer, but it does not seem like that is the case. But yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic, because I think, like, looking at the team, it was like, okay, Annemiek van Vleuten is leaving. A lot of the pressure from that departure is going to be on Liana Lippert, but they didn't have Liana Lippert, and I don't think that I do think that there are other riders on that team that could have maybe picked up more slack, Like Flirty Mackay is incredible. She's like so knowledgeable about bike racing and about tactics and being in the race. And she's been doing this for a really long time. And if you kind of pair up Flirty Mackay and you pair her with Arlena Sierra, I just see that as a match made in heaven, you know?
Valid points. I feel like, I don't know if it's just me, I haven't noticed Florcha as much this year. Like last year, I felt her presence, she was very much a winning rider back in the days of when she was with Liv Plantour, and before that, like all the versions of it she seemed to have gone through. And I think Gracie has spoken about this before. She was a rider that's like was progressing, had immense talent and just great race knowledge and just a good feel for where to be in the peloton, which is quite often a lot of the Dutch riders. And then it's like she got to a point where she just has stopped progressing in a sense and is still doing similar sort of moves, but you just don't notice her as much. And maybe that speaks to the depth of the peloton too, and just her function within Movistar during the Annemiek years.
She's on Movistar for another 2 years. She signed a pretty long contract. Yeah, I think looking at her spring, she maybe didn't have the spring that she wanted, and her last race was Amstel Gold Race, but she did do a good chunk of the classic, so perhaps just taking a break right now. I think that Movistar's days are coming. I think that Liana Lippert it's just kind of a ticking time bomb until she's
I think she's going to be at her
winning.
best once the Tour de France Femmerbeck Zwift rolls around. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I was going to say the same.
She's coming for that race.
Yeah, she's just chilling with her dog, Flirty Mackay. I mean, I'm doing in real time fact checking, see if what she was doing post classics, hanging out with her dog, being a dog mom. Love to see it. Well, yeah, Navarro was a really awesome race, and we have a couple more one-day races in Spain this week. So definitely make sure to keep an eye out for those. And I'll mention more details about those in the newsletter. If you don't subscribe to the Wheel Talk newsletter, it exists. And I do preview races sometimes in there. So I'll be previewing Volta a Burgos in there as well, which is this weekend. Last weekend, we had Itzulia. And like almost speechless, but it's been a while since we talked about utter SC Worx-Protime dominance, and now we're back to it for Itzulia with 3 stage wins. They did pretty much, they looked at the script from last year's Itzulia and they were like, yeah, again. And so they did Misha Bredold with stages 1 and 2, and then handed it off to Demi Vollering to take the 3rd stage and the overall general classification. Her second win of the second general classification win at Itzulia. She won the first edition back in 2022, has now won the 2024 edition. Last year's Marlon Reusser, and SC Worx now has a 100% success rate at Itzulia. They've won all 9 stages in the history of the race. And of those 9 stages, Demi Vollering has won 6 of them. So that's just like insane.
It's interesting to me how quickly we've gone from, gee, Vollering's having a pretty ordinary year so far, to, geez, Vollering keeps winning a lot of things, doesn't she? And I feel like that's going to keep happening over the next few weeks as well. And she looked really, really good all of Itzulia. Even though she didn't win the first 2 stages, she was super aggressive. It was really cool to see her riding a lead out for Bredewold in the first stage. I don't know if you want to go stage by stage, Abby, but it was just, yeah, I thought Vollering was really good, and I thought SD Worx played it really well overall. And I was kind of looking back at their plan today, just in prep for this. I was looking back at their pre-race plan and how they described what they were going to try and do. And the rider that they featured in their press release was Marlon Reusser as the defending champ, talking about how she wanted to win it again. But they're also saying that Blanca Vas would be the rider for that first stage, and that was the plan going into the stage until apparently she wasn't feeling all that well, so they switched it up to Bredewold. So, and I thought Bredewold did a great job of capitalising on that opportunity, taking that first stage win and then going on with it from there.
Agree 100%. That was the highlight, I think, actually, of the tour. And her win on the second stage, the way that she won that as well. When you see someone who's just worked so hard for their team all season, and then at the very last minute is actually given this opportunity, I mean, I think they back her as a rider, but obviously in the standing, there were a couple ahead of her at this race. But she just showed her potential for the future, and the fact that she could just switch it on like that. Probably, yeah, literally on the day, on the radio when Blancovas was maybe not feeling great. So that takes a kind of skill and strength to be able to do that. And I hope that we actually see Misha in the spotlight a bit more going forwards. I can't remember whose draft team is she on. That's all I could think. Aha. Yeah. Abby.
It's me, and
Good
I'm proud.
pick.
Yeah.
I think there are more points to come. And I mean, yeah, to take second on GC in quite a hard tour was impressive.
Yeah, I don't know what's more impressive from her, honestly. Like, the first stage she won from, basically, it was a bunch sprint, pretty much. And we know that she has a good kick on her, but that was impressive. The second stage was super impressive. I mean, she was just in the right place at the right time, but she rode purely on instinct, well in the leader's jersey, which not everyone can do. And the second stage was like, if you ever want to just watch a really good bike race, just watch the second stage of Itzulia, because it was amazing. I mean, over the top of one of the big climbs, Demi Vollering went solo, and she was solo, and then she got caught by Shabby, and then Marlon Reusser caught them. And so it was the three of them. There was a hilarious moment where Reusser told Shabby that if she didn't work, then they would attack her. And the commentary was, the commentators, the race commentators, Marty and Danny, were like, no, she doesn't have to race. And I was like, the same thing at home. I was like, no, she doesn't have to ride this move. Why would she ride this move? It's two SC Worx riders that both have a better Palmares than her. Like, she can just sit on. It was hilarious. It was a hilarious moment. And then that got caught by a group, and then attacks went from that group, and then eventually it was Juliette Labousse who went off the front. She was caught by Mavi Garcia, and then Misha caught up with them shortly after, and the three of them rode to the finish. And it was a really, really small gap they had from the group behind. I think only the editing of this episode is going to be super fun for me. I'll just do it right now because now I'm awake. The gap that they had on the group behind, stop it.
It was only about 4 seconds in the end, I think.
Yeah, the gap they had on the group behind the group that rode to the line with Olivia Barrel taking fourth and Demi Vollering fifth on the stage was only 4 seconds behind. So they didn't have a huge gap, but Misha I feel like just being in the leader's jersey and being able to take that moment and be like, no, I'm just going to go. And I feel like that was the moment when I was like, oh, she's not going for the overall of this race. She's going for the moments of this race that are her moments, but we're going to see Vollering take the third stage, and that's exactly what happened. But for Bredewold to then like ride out of her mind over those climbs, she's not a climber, she's not a great climber, but she still was able to regain contact with the group behind Vollering, take third on the stage, and secure second on GC. And I feel like all three performances by Bredewold on 3 different days were like 3 different skill sets, and it was so impressive.
Yeah, and just on that second stage, you talked about her not being the best climber there. She said afterwards that she was quite nervous about the finish because there was that nasty steep ramp just before the finish line, and she was with 2 very good climbers in Mavi Garcia and Juliette Labousse, so she had to play it really well. And she did that. She played it perfectly, sort of sat on and let them do the work, and then she came through at the right moment just as it flattened off a little bit. And by the time she crossed the line, I think she even got a time gap of a second or so a second by the time she crossed the line. She just sprinted so well from there. So, yeah, I think she was super impressive, and we've talked about it already, but taking those opportunities when they come your way is such an important thing to do, particularly on a team like SD Worx where there are so many hitters around you, and it might not be all that often that you get the chance to do so. And I think it was her first, stage 1 was her first victory since winning the European Champions jersey back in last September, so that would have felt really good, and then backing it up a day later and then going on to finish second overall. What a 3 days for her.
Yeah, she was pretty clear that she was disappointed in the spring that she had, and especially after winning the European Championships last end of last year and then coming into this year with the team. She crashed at Strade Bianche and was pretty emotional at the finish line there, and the spring kind of just snowballed from there. I mean, she didn't have a terrible spring, but I think she did expect more of herself after winning that European Championship. And so this is a great, more proof that it was a deserving victory for her at the Euros, because there was, a little bit of drama out of that win and the Dutch tactics, and that they were riding for Wiebes, and it was weird on the podium. And I think for Bredewald, she's so young, she's still got so much in front of her in her career, and she's still kind of just learning what type of rider she is. But being on SD Worx, she is very much a domestique at this moment, and I think that one of the things that SD Worx does so well is they have so many winners on the team. In the years past, they've had, there have been spring seasons where they've won like every single spring classic with pretty much a different rider every year, every single weekend. And we had like Chantal van der Broek-Black winning Strade Bianche. We had like Van der Breggen winning something. And then we had like Amy Peters winning something. And it was just like every single weekend, it was a different SD Worx rider. And they were so good at shifting leadership or kind of just going with the flow of the race and deciding on the fly, like who was going to be, basically letting the race decide who the leader was. No one on the team had a problem with that. They were all just kind of ready to go along with it as long as it was SD Worx winning the race. And I feel like in the last couple of years, they've drifted away from that in a way, because they've had such strong individual personalities on the team between Wiebes, Kopecky, Vollering. Those three are kind of their big three, right? And during the spring season, they had Wiebes and Kopecky just sweeping up races, and then Vollering took over at La Vuelta. But for Bredewald to step in now and kind of be like, hey, I'm still here. I'm like going to be your fourth big rider. And then if you look at the rest of the team, they still have Reusser, they still have Blanca Voss, who's incredible. They still have Neef Fischer-Black. So I feel like Bredewald's win, and then Demi's just incredible performance on the third stage. You're looking at that team, and maybe they had, for them, a disappointing spring. But now going into the stage racing season, it's like, well, we had a good run of non-SD Worx dominance, but I think that time has passed.
And if we think about Marlen Reusser, her form is still coming as well. So that's another rider that's on that team that's going to want to prove herself and get results for herself too. Because simply being someone who just works is not enough for her.
Man, it's insane that she's back in the peloton.
Yeah.
Already. Like, crashed at Flanders, broke her jaw, was on a liquid diet, is already back to racing World Tour stage races, and like she's not exactly missed the beat. Like, she's still up there. She was still in that move with Shabby and Vollering on stage 2 after some pretty hard climbs. So
it sounds like she's still struggling too with those injuries. She had a quote after the race saying, after the Spanish block, my vacation will consist of visiting medics for further follow-up on my jaw, ear canals and teeth, which just sounds like a gnarly way to spend your time. But also, interestingly, she said that she wants to target GC at both the Tour de Suisse, which makes sense being a Swiss rider, but also the Giro. So I don't know how Neef Fischer-Black's going to feel about that, or others are going to feel about that, but that's an interesting one.
The Giro.
Apparently.
I mean, I rate her. She's incredible. She's an incredible rider, but when we think of a race like the Giro, and I mean, honestly, I haven't really looked. I don't even know if the parcours are out yet for that, but that's just not a race. I think that a tour like that's too much of an ambitious goal to verbalize. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like, I would place Rihanna Marcus as slightly above her in terms of ability to win such a race. But again, Rihanna Marcus isn't going to win a Giro if you have top climbers showing up.
To be fair, without Van Vleuten, it's really a wide open race now. It's anyone's for the taking. It's been her race for so long. Even when she, didn't win it, it was still her race. And looking at the race profiles, there's pretty much one stage that I think would really challenge Reusser, and that's the 7th stage, is a mountaintop. A big one, like a big mountaintop, like a real high mountain top. But other than that, there's really not like a ton of climbing at the race. There's there is a lot of climbing because it's the Giro, but there's nothing like, you know, I can't remember which Giro it was.
Mountains. Yeah. Was that maybe this?
Stage 4 is pretty hilly, but only in the end of the race. And like, yeah, the final 2 stages there are mountains, but that 7th stage would be a hard one for Marlon to get over. But I also think that she won Valenciana, right? She did a pretty great job there, despite there being a mountain at one point, but it still ended like after the finish was still after the descent. So it's kind of a whole different beast than when you have like a classic mountaintop. But actually it's pretty impressive that she would
I just had to go back and find the quote because I started doubting myself. But here's the quote, and this was before Itzulia. She said, "I feel I made serious strides in the Vuelta. My goals remain unchanged. I'm aiming for classification wins in the Tour de Suisse and the Giro Donne."
I mean, that's good for my draft team, right? But back to your point, Matt, about Neef Fisher-Black. I'm wondering what the thought process would be there within the team. I really was hoping that the Giro would be her big opportunity. I think that she's been riding well, but I don't know if in terms of her overall finishing in the GCs and stages have been exactly what maybe she's wanted personally. But again, maybe she has just been building towards the Giro.
I mean, I guess we'll find out soon.
Neef Fisher-Black is on a contract year. Marlon Royce is on contract year. Misha Bredewald's on contract year.
No, last week when we talked about SC Worx and kind of the dynamic at the Vuelta, we didn't mention that pretty much all of these riders are on a contract year. SC Worx only has, I think, 3 riders now with Wiebes's extension signed for next year, and it's like Femke Gerritse and Wiebes and Kopecky. And so their future as a team is like, I mean, probably pretty set. It's probably a lot of the riders that are currently on the team, but there's also riders that are leaving the team. Like, we don't know what Chantal Vandenbroek Black is doing next year, for example. We know that Christine Majerus is leaving. She's retiring. And so the team is going to be really pretty different next year with a lot of the veterans on the team leaving, and obviously Demi leaving is going to be a huge change for them. But at the Vuelta, I think part of the weird dynamic was like that there are so many riders on the team that are out of contract. So it's not like if you're being told to do one thing and you don't feel great about it, it's not like you can really do anything, because you kind of have to do what you're being told because you want a job. And that's kind of just how it works. And yeah, for Reusser and Neef Fisher-Black, they both would like to continue racing their bikes, I'm sure. And so they're gonna do what they need to do to be able to do that. And I think we've heard now that Daniel Benson reported I don't know like how he knows contract stuff. It's just insane. His Twitter is the place to be if you ever want to know anything about contract rumors. But it's pretty relatively certain that Reusser is going to be going to Movistar next year. So that's going to be a huge loss for them as a team and a huge gain for Movistar. And we know that Canyon Bikes, they really put a lot of emphasis in their time trials. And they were the ones that were, really pressuring Canyon SRAM, or not pressuring, but were really pushing for Canyon SRAM to sign Chloe Degert on such a long contract. And they were also a huge reason why Annemiek went to Movistar. So for Reusser going to Movistar, it kind of makes sense in the terms of her time trialing abilities. And also kind of the vacant spot that is currently in Movistar, with Lippert still not quite stepping up to the expectations. Again, she will absolutely do it. But at this current moment in time, I think they're looking at their spring and looking at the riders on the market. And yeah, I also would want to take Movistar or take Marlon Reusser as a rider. So we know that she's leaving the team, or we're pretty sure that she's leaving the team. And as for Neef Fisher-Black, there's been very slim amounts of information, but she's been on that team for a couple years now, and I think that they really value her as a rider. But I also wouldn't hate to see her go somewhere else.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'd be cool to see her get some more opportunities of her own. We saw earlier in the season what she can do when she's given the chance, so I think that'd be cool for her personally. The first thing that comes to mind with the Reusser departure, possibly to Movistar is that it's going to be really cool to see Vollering, Reuser and Kopecky all on different teams. You know, we talked before briefly about the possibility of more SD Worx dominance, and full credit to them. You know, their job is to win races and they do it very well. But as a fan, I think seeing some of those top hitters in the peloton spread out on different teams is only a good thing, and I'm excited to see what that looks like regardless of where they end up.
We're gonna roll up to Omloop Pet Newsblad next year, and it's gonna be like somebody like scooped up the peloton and like shook them like dice and then just went, let them loose.
I'm here for it.
It's gonna be really, really exciting. My previews are gonna be like, I don't know, it could be anybody. Because it's
throw the dice. What's fun is like when you've had such like a strong team like SD Worx-Protime, and those riders are used to racing together and they know how each other race and they know how they think. That's when you have like the really fun moments as a spectator watching that, because they know roughly what each of them can do in terms of strengths and weaknesses and what would be going through their mind. I mean, obviously the team chat before the race will be very different because they'll be on different teams with different directors, but I think we'll just see that front group swell even more, but with different riders, as in different teams. Same riders, different teams.
Very exciting stuff. And yeah, I think Itzulia, like, despite the fact that SD Worx has a 100% win rate there, it was a pretty good race. There was a lot of really great stuff that happened throughout the race, and a lot of notable riders outside of the SD Worx camp. I feel like for me, I just keep going back to Talita de Jong, who finished second on the third stage, won the reduced bunch sprint for second behind Vollering, and she's a rider who, you know, has been in the peloton for a really long time, but she's still pretty young. Like, she's only 30, but she's been bounced around on teams for a good chunk of her career, showed a lot of promise early on, and was on Rabobank in the beginning of her career. Was part of the like Rabo Live mafia back when it was the SD Worx of its day. And then was kind of bounced around smaller Belgian teams before she signed for Live Racing in 2022. And now she's on Lotto Destiny this year and for next year. And she's had like a pretty rough go of it, injuries and illness throughout the years. But she's had such a great spring so far. Like, if you kind of glance through her results, she's got a bunch of top 10 finishes, and then had a pretty strong Vuelta as well with a bunch of top 12 finishes. She finished 12th 3 times at the Vuelta, and then to finish second in the stage of Itzulia and 7th overall is just a really, really great to see from Talita de Jong.
Definitely. I had her down in my notes as already when she popped up at Het Nieuwsblad this year. I was like, wow, it's good to see her up in the mix. 5th, damn, like, she's back. She's always been a rider with heaps of potential, but yeah, like you said, injuries, illnesses, it's just been one of those careers for her, unfortunately. But I thought Olivia Barrel, it's a rider that we've spoken about many times before. I think you in particular, Abby, being Canadian. She just seems to be building and building. Always been a rider that's up there in the top 10s. And I think as the season goes on, we're going to see her slipping into more of those podium positions. But I thought a really great tour from her, and also good to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Olivia Barrel, like, she's one that's just kind of up and amongst it constantly. She's always kind of there, and she's had some pretty strong results in the past. Like, she did really well at this race last year. I remember it was kind of like a breakout performance for her, and followed it up with a couple strong rides as well this year and finished 6th overall, which is good. Like, she's so new to the peloton and so new to racing, or new to the European scene, and is really kind of learning as she's going, and it's good to see.
Yeah, and we said it's been a bit of a tough year for Movistar so far. She's been one of the shining lights, I think, and it really feels like the move to that team from UAE last year has allowed her to take a bit more of a step up. It's easily her best season so far. Just if you look at the numbers alone, and very very promising, and I'm sure we'll see more from her going forward. And just quickly on Talita de Jong, just to go back to her, I was also really impressed by her, and it's, if you care about numbers like I do, you'll note that it's her best season of her long career as well, which is really cool to see. But also she made an interesting point in her post-race quotes about how she very nearly ended up coming third overall at the race. It was only because of the peloton catching the chase group quite close before the end of stage 3 that she kind of got nudged down the GC. And that was only because Movistar missed that move and ended up chasing it back. But I mean, you can deal in what ifs or whatever. Maybe that's not the strongest point, but she had a really strong race, and it could have even been a better finish if things had gone just a little bit more her way.
Yeah, but I think for her, she's just going to keep taking from these performances and building on them. And we have another short, similar stage race coming up this weekend. So if you've got the form, keep it rolling, It was also great to see Mavi Garcia up there again, kind of on the attack, but also she finished 4th overall, and she had a really disappointing Vuelta. She went in for Livalula Jaco as their GC rider, and then, had a rough go of it. And so to see her bounce back so quickly is quite impressive. Elise Chabi back in the peloton, love to see it, especially the second stage on the attack with Demi. And I feel like, speaking of actually Livalula Jaco, we really got to give a shout out to Ella Wiley for finishing 10th overall.
Yes.
And being up there, being in the mix.
Yep, and taking the youth jersey at the end. I had that down as well. I thought just in general they seem to be building as well as a team. Better results, seem that things are gelling a bit better. It was good to see Erska Zigarts up there in the move on, what was it, day 2 or 3. So as a team, I think things are starting to look a bit better. It's signing those new riders and diversifying a bit has been, I think, a good approach for them.
It was also cool, just on an Australian point here, cool to see Amber Pate get 7th on the first stage. Now that might sound like a minor result to call out, but that's her best individual result in Europe in her career so far, and cool to see her up amongst it.
Good shout out. And another shout out there, I just wanted to say I don't know if I already said this already, I was very impressed with the young Canadian Isabella Holgram, who is 19 years old, up there in the mix in a World Tour race as well. Super impressive. I think she even landed in the top 20 in the GC in the end. So that was very impressive for me. And just her future looks bright. Yeah,
I agree with that totally. I had her down as one to mention. I think she was in that chase group on the final stage, which, that was really impressive. Some really impressive riders around her to manage to get into that group. I think it was, Little Trek would probably say they had a frustrating race. They were plenty aggressive and proactive, but didn't really get much to show from it. But I think seeing Holmgren ride well and seeing Fleur Moors as well, the 18-year-old Belgian, get 5th on the opening stage, I think just a few really good signs for their young contingent. Because as we know, they got a lot of young riders in over the off-season, and we've talked about that. But to see them start to take that step up in their first seasons is really cool, and speaks of an exciting future in the years to come.
With such a big calendar these days as well, you can't expect, I mean, I know the big teams do want to show up to every race and get results, but there are still bigger things to come, so you can't always bring necessarily that A team. So I think it's great to just have a bit of a younger team show up with some experienced riders and just give them the chance to have a crack, because that's the only way you learn.
Yeah, and I mean, Trek would have known going into this year when they signed 5 18-year-olds that they're playing the long game. When it comes to some of those riders. I mean, they're still up in the mix, and it's great to see, but it's also such a delicate it's delicate. You have to not put too much pressure on them, not put them in too many races, and I think they've done well so far. leaving them their world tour races, but they're not going to be as demanding as the classics, and they're letting them ease into it. So I think that their goals are later in the season, but they probably are still disappointed. But I don't think that this was something that they're gonna like be beating their heads against the wall over.
I just wanted to give a little bit of a shout out to the course designers at Itzulia. Might sound like a strange thing, but I think they designed some really interesting courses. Those 3 stages are really cool. They had a bunch of climbing in them, but they were always, the last climbs were 20, 30 Ks out from the finish, which made for an interesting sort of setup where you have riders trying to go solo over the top. And, we saw Loren get away on stage 2, but wasn't able to turn that into a win. And then the following day she was able to turn that into a win, but it took a pretty amazing ride holding off a motivated chase group on terrain that didn't suit a solo rider. And I think just having finishes like that where it could go either way and there is climbing, but it's not right at the end, so you don't just automatically get the best climber winning, I thought it made for really interesting racing. And like I said, it took something pretty special from Vollering to manage to win that final stage and win the race overall. And it was good to see.
It's a really great point, Matt.
I agree. I love the courses. This is why we love you, Matt.
I was just going to say that. This is why we love having you on. You always bring like just a different perspective. Yep.
Damn it.
See, we've spent too much time.
The same brain.
We've spent too much time together. But that's such a valuable point because I think in the podcast last week how we said that the stages themselves at the Vuelta weren't super interesting, at least at the start, which made for sometimes a little bit predictable or boring racing. I mean, it did build into a much better race to watch, but if you look at the Discord for this race, everyone was really excited about it. It was just 3 stages, but they did a really good job. I think even the last stage followed the old San Sebastian climbs and courses or something like that, which is always a fantastic one-day race. And then it makes you think currently what's going on in the men's Giro. And I'm sorry, I haven't been following it, but when you have the predicted winner taking the jersey already on stage 2, that's not always the best way to go about designing it, like a tour. That said, I mean, Pogacar is a rider who can kind of do it all in a sense. But I'm trying to think of what tour it was when, was it Annemiek took the jersey on day 1? Was it the Giro?
It was the Giro 2020. Was it Giro 2021 where they had a mountaintop on stage 2 and SD Worx went 1, 2, 3. Mm-hmm. Annemiek wasn't there because she was starting the Olympics, so she skipped the Giro that year. It was Ashley Moolman-Pasio, Anna van der Breggen, and I think Demi Vollering went 1, 2, 3 on pretty much every single major stage of that race. But it was like the second stage was a mountaintop, and then I think the 4th stage was like an uphill time trial. And so the GC was pretty much wrapped up on stage 2. And if it wasn't wrapped up on stage 2, it was solid on stage 4. And then there was still like 6 stages to go. And they proceeded to do it again later on in the week.
And I mean, as a fan, like, that's just not what you want to see. You want to see the battle towards it all the way to the finish line, right? And you want to see different winners.
I think we were doing dailies maybe for that one, and both of us were just like, what to say?
We're just going to go straight to the rider diaries.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's the same race that you're referring to, Abby, but just looking at last year's Giro where Van Vleuten won stage 2. Because you remember the prologue was called off because it was super wet.
That's right. Yep.
It was that wet day was cancelled. And then Van Vleuten wins the first road stage to take pink and then wins another 2 stages and just holds pink all the way from start to finish. So, yeah.
The Giro, I think the Giro is typically, they sometimes they do a great job. Like sometimes they're great, but sometimes they leave a bit to be desired. But 2021 was really the year that it was like, this is ridiculous, guys. And that was the year that they lost their World Tour status because they didn't have any live coverage of the 2022 edition. No, 2020 edition when that rule came into play. But anyway, we digress. I agree with Matt. I loved the courses. Like they were kind of like not three classic stages thrown into a stage race, but something that felt really refreshing after the stages that decided the general classification at the Vuelta. And I think it just makes for really fun racing. And stage 2, is the stage that I point to that I'm like, yeah, these courses are great because look at that. But also, like, for the final stage, it was another like hilly stage, but not a mountainous stage. And Vollering, I think we cannot avoid how good she is right now. Oh my gosh, for her to hold off the chase, and the chase was obviously not going as fast as her because they were caught by a larger group behind that contained Bredewold, so the chase wasn't making headway at all. And once they got caught by that big group, it was too late. There was no time to bring her back, but she rode so well and she was so strong. And I think I did see some comments on the Discord and on the race report at the end of the race about her attacking her teammate while in the leader's jersey, but I think that was always the plan for the team, and I don't think there's any drama there. Like, going into that final stage, they knew that Bredewold was going to struggle on the climbs, and even when you look at how they played stage 2, it was clear that they were riding for Vollering to win this race. And so she really took the race into her own hands. And I feel like for that, the general classification going into the final stage, you could look at that as Van der Breggen, the DS for the team at this race. Loved seeing her back in the car. I'm a big fan of her. So happy to see her back in the car at this race. And if she's looking at the GC and looking how close Lebu and Garcia are to Bredewold in the GC in that final stage, she's like, we need to be proactive because the chances of them dropping Bredewold on a climb are very high.
Yeah.
And then Vollering will be 5 seconds, I think, behind them and need to find 5 seconds somewhere. So the better option is just to send Vollering off the front while she's on this incredible run of form that she displayed at the Vuelta, and let her do her thing and take the GC. It was the best way for them to win the race, and they deployed it perfectly.
And hey, Bredewold had a fantastic day and ended up with second overall, which she would be absolutely stoked with, I think. Not expecting that at all going into that race.
Yeah, she was funny on I think the second stage reaction was pretty incredible. Yeah. She was just
love to see it.
Almost a little bit speechless.
Yeah. Love to see it.
Well, we have 4 more stages, similar hilly-ish racing coming up May 16th to the 19th at Vuelta a Burgos. And I assume it will be a lot of the same riders that will show up to this race. That's what happened last year. The start list isn't out yet as of Monday, but we'll know soon. And stay tuned to the Wheel Talk newsletter because I will be doing a full preview on there. But let's wrap it up. The only other rumor that I meant to talk about, one of the rumors was the Reusser transfer. The other rumor is that there might be a Milan-San Remo next year. Yeah. They're navigating how to fit a women's Milan-San Remo into the calendar, which might mean shifting Trofeo Alfredo Binda a week earlier, which would make it Strada Binda Milan-San Remo, which is great for team cars that don't have to drive all the way back to the Netherlands for Drunta. But that's an interesting thing to keep an eye on. And we love Binda, and it's a long-standing race on the women's side, so definitely don't want to see RCS come in and like steamroll over one of the longest running women's races that just doesn't have the funding and backing that they do. But I think there is a solution, and it's one that leads to a more environmentally friendly is a strong term to use when you're talking about professional sport that uses a lot of cars and a lot of consumerism, but a little bit more like cohesive calendar in not making riders fly all the way back to the Netherlands after opening weekend to Strada and then back to Drenthe and then back to Binda. So it would be, in that sense, I think I would be keen to see a Milan-San Remo for the women if they can figure out the calendar without kind of crushing any of the existing standalone women's races, because the 2 races that are kind of in jeopardy are Ronde van Drenthe and Binda. But I also obviously Drenthe used to have a men's race. I believe they canceled it, and they now just kind of focus on the women's. But I also am sticking to my feet in the sand about how I don't think that women's cycling should continue to be under this umbrella of men's cycling, and there's a fine line when you have the men's races that have a women's race tacked on to it. So I feel a little bit on the fence about this.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but on the other hand, I just think about how cool it would be to see the women's peloton hitting the Cipressa and the Poggio.
Yes,
I just want to see that.
You mean you think about how cool it would see for Wiebes to take yet another
Well, I mean,
win?
if she can get over the Cipressa and the Poggio and win on the Via Roma, I think more power to her. That'd be amazing. That'd be so cool.
She could do it. She's got the characteristics
it would
to
be
do
a
it.
good race, that's for sure. And it wouldn't be 280 kilometers long or however long the men race. They would have it be. I think they said in the they didn't have like a release or anything. It was more of an information leak, but it would be, I think, around 150 to 180 kilometers for the women. So on the long side, but not insane like the men's.
I hope that if that does happen, that Binder doesn't get shafted, because it is a great race. But also, a point I was going to bring up was that I really like this block of Spanish races. It gives us a nice little narrative. You know, you talk about the Vuelta, Navarra Classic we talked about, Itzulia, and then Burgos after this. The idea of having an Italian block as well not only makes more sense logistically, but it also just gives us a nice narrative, I think, in that Classics period. So I hope that all sticks together.
I kind of wish it was like Itzulia, Burgos, and then the Vuelta.
Yeah, that's true.
Like
So
building.
kind of like built into.
That's
the
true.
week.
That would be better, I think, yep.
But I agree. I like the Spanish block, that they're on different sides of Spain, but it's still like there is a good narrative to it for storytellers like Matt.
We're all storytellers.
It's kind of-
We're all in the business of telling stories.
That's why we're here. Speaking of telling stories, I'll just rattle off my obsession really, really quickly. Taylor Swift returned to the Eras Tour on Thursday with the European legs kicking off in Paris, and in between her shows for the first leg of the Eras Tour and this one, she obviously came out with a new album, and so she rearranged the whole set list and included the new album in the new version of the Eras Tour, and her performances during the Tortured Poets Department set of the Eras Tour are pretty incredible, especially Who's Afraid of Little Old Me, and I'll link it in the show notes if anybody is interested. Matt, you got any obsessions?
I was just going to ask if somebody wanted to learn more about the Tortured Poets Department and hear some cycling journalists talking about music. Where do you reckon they might go? Have you got any suggestions on that front?
There is. I actually have heard of a pretty cool podcast that they made it like it's like a book club, but for albums. So they it's super cool. It's a really cool concept, called The Cool Concept by actually one of the artists that they reviewed on the podcast. So that's pretty rad right there. But it's called The Album Files.
Okay. Should
Put
check
it in the
out.
show notes.
Yeah, sounds cool.
Would recommend.
My obsession. I recently watched both of the Dune films. I'm a sci-fi fan, and strangely, for some reason, I'd never read the Dune novel or novels that followed it. So seeing the films was amazing. I loved them, and it made me want to dive more into that universe. I made sure that I read the novel before I saw the film, but then saw the two films. But then having seen the two films, which adapt the first book, I found myself compelled to read on. And fans of the series kind of are split on whether you should just read the first book or read a few of the books that follow or keep on going. There's a whole bunch, and they get weirder and weirder from what I've heard. So I'm interested if any listeners have any thoughts on how far I should go with the series, but I'm really enjoying the second book, Dune Messiah, and I'll probably go on to the third one as well, but very keen for people's thoughts. You can hit us up in Discord, but that's been really cool. And I think seeing the films and then going back to the written form has given me an interesting appreciation for it, even though the two do diverge. So yeah, that's been really cool.
Are they big reads, Matt? Because I'm due to start reading a new book.
The first novel is 500 and something pages, but there's a lot of world building. It's like it's a dense entry to the series. There's a lot of world building to start with, but the world is so amazing. It's so beautifully done and so evocative. So definitely worth reading the first one, and then if you enjoy that, yeah, I'd certainly read the second one as well.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I that's why I love the podcast too. I get like book recommendations almost weekly now, so it's good for me.
I could recommend a book to you.
And I need a new one. I'm almost done.
I recently read there's this book called When the Moon Hatched. That's
When the
really
Moon
good.
Hatched.
I would recommend it.
What am I obsessed with? Well, the weather here in Belgium is starting to get really good. So I'm looking forward to getting outside on my bike I've been commuting to work on my electric bike, but I'm looking forward to weekend rides outside. So I'm just like a bit obsessed about the good weather that is coming, and trying to lock in like an adventure ride every Sunday pretty much. And then I'm hoping once we move houses, gonna finally sell my car and looking at either cargo bike options, so this is kind of what I've been obsessing over at the moment, or a bike trailer. So anyone who has swapped the car out for a bike to get around with kids, I'd love to hear what you're doing. I guess for Aussies, it's a little less common, depending where you live. Definitely for Queenslanders, I think people using cargo bikes and bike trailers and stuff to ferry your children around isn't so common. But I think in Melbourne, maybe Sydney, it's becoming a little more normal in a way. But obviously, because I live in Belgium, we have the infrastructure, and it's just how people move around here. So that's what I'm looking at, whether to get a bike trailer, like one of the Thule ones that can fit 2 kids. And then like when we go on holidays, we can use that as like our little adventure pram in a sense, or to go the Buckfit's cargo bike route. So if anyone is doing that, I'd love to hear how you made your decision.
I'm a big fan of the cargo bike.
Yeah, you've got the Trek.
We have one.
Buckfit's.
Yeah, we have one in Montana, and it's amazing. And one of the funniest things about riding it is actually the reactions you get from all the people on the street. Like, I don't think I've ridden it a single time and not have somebody like be confused, and at least one person tell me that it's amazing. Like, I was the other day, my nephew was here hanging out with Lila, and then when it was time for him to go home, I was like, would you like me to take you in the cargo bike? And he was like, heck yeah, or the bucket bike, we call it. And so he's 15, so he was hanging out in the bucket bike. And we were stopped at a stoplight, and this old couple rolled up, and they were just like so excited. And they were like, that's amazing. That looks so fun. And they were like, I hope you didn't build that yourself. And I was like, I did not build it myself. But it was really funny, and I think it's just like insanely useful, the bucket bike. It holds up to like 400 pounds, I think. That needs to be fact checked, but it's like really, you can put a lot of stuff in the front, and you can put 2 kids, because there's 2 seats, so you can put 2 kids, strap them in. There's still a ton of room for groceries. So I'm a big fan of that one, but it is also a little bit more cumbersome in terms of like, you couldn't really take it on vacation with you. Because
it's basically, those bikes are like, if you get rid of your car, that's it. That's your new, inverted commas, car.
If we lived here full time, we would not have a car, and we would just have the bucket bike because it's amazing. Although winters here are pretty brutal, so maybe we need a car for the winter. But the bucket bike, I swear by it. It is amazing. It's so much fun. Lila loves it. I love it. It's super convenient. And I know there's a couple brands that make really good ones, but I do really like the Trek one. I don't think I've charged it a single time yet, and I've ridden it many times. It's fun. It's a fun one. Would recommend.
Yeah. All right.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone for listening to this episode. We'll be back next week to talk about Vuelta a Burgos, and for the love of God, I hope that I'm healthy for it. I have one request, one universal request for the universe.
I think no more 4 a.m. I've said this now the 3rd time. No more 4 a.m. wake up. I think that's what your body needs.
We'll see. because you can't exactly go back to sleep after recording a podcast. Matt knows it's like 9 p.m. now for you, Matt? So 9:15 almost, you're going to be wired for the next 45 minutes.
Oh, when we did the Vuelta one and we finished recording at about 3 a.m, I couldn't sleep until about 5. I was just absolutely wired. It was no good.
We love you guys. See what we do for you? Anyway, thanks so much for listening, everybody. We're really happy to make this podcast, even at weird hours of the day. And we'll be back next week.